rise of the matriarch, because everybody has a cranium, but everybody within their neurophysiology, they don't have neuromelanin to activate those melanocytes, which is basically an intelligence molecule to activate those 13 crystals that sits inside the third ventricle of the brain to where you can manipulate everything in third density, right? So now this works in conjunction with the manipulation of the grid system, right? And I'm gonna prove it to you because it tells you that, the ancient technology of these 13 crystal skulls has the same computer functions as the electrical grid systems, right? An older computer may contain more information, but it depends on very much who programmed it, as it what information contains it. Much like computers, energy can be cleared, deleted, or cleansed from crystal skulls, but the imprint of the information contains does not go away. It remains stored within. As a new computer, a new crystal allows access to all information through like Wi-Fi, like connections, right? And the connections to all crystals all over the world, both ancient and modern, through the cosmic internet of the crystal skull grid that manipulates the grid system, which is also known as the net of Indria, which is also equated to the draconian reptilian net, the dragon ley lines that keeps you trapped in time inside the simulation. So when these crystals are activated, not just these ancient monolithic artifacts of these crystals, the crystals in your mind, the crystals in your brain, by way of the cosmic convergence of the matriarch, when everybody comes together in a form of the Christ consciousness unity, you can manipulate this grid system, right? So this works in tandem to what took place when you're talking about the CrowdStrike global Windows crash, latest updates, aftermath of the biggest IT outage in history, right? So also what took place with Donald Trump's situation a few days ago when he had that attempt on his life, when you look at the symbolism within the infrastructure, when he had that, the red residue from his ear wiped across his face, that was basically the symbol of the CrowdStrike. Let me get it. It basically equated to the CrowdStrike symbolism right here. So if you look at Donald Trump's face, right, he has the same symbol. When you see my cursor, that is the CrowdStrike symbol. He wiped that across his face on purpose because it's a form of symbolism. They know what's going to be taking place on the planet just within the infrastructure of their sigil system. That's how they communicate, right? So there's another video I'm going to be showing, talking about the manipulation of the grid system, right? So I'm going to show you this video of this elder giving out knowledge, because she's talking about, all this stuff is taking place because the matriarch is facilitated by the 13 crystal skulls. The 13 crystal skulls is it could be symbolism, talking about the cosmic convergence of the indigenous people that manipulates these outages on the planet in increments and basically in fractions.
Let me tell y'all what the hell truly happening. The shift is happening, and the power wealth transfer is happening energetically, spiritually. And so they have to give you something physically for you to see from their perspective of what's happening. But what's happening is the last shall be first, the first shall be last. These planets have been in cycles that's connected to us. And the cycle of America.
And the cycle of America was facilitated by the 12 solar cycle, right? As we segue into the 13th solar cycle, which is basically the completion of the matriarchal order, right? Because the 12th solar cycle was acclimated to the precessional circle of the equinox, the 24,000 year beatification period under the lunar cycle that was under the age of Pisces under the Draconian star constellation. So now everything was reverting back into its original balance. What is balance? Mayat, matriarch, right? I'm gonna play the video.
Controlling minds of masses of people. Their power is being given back to the people. Now that's if you're doing your work. I don't know your life and what you're doing out there. Okay? Stand in your own energy, stand in your own vibration, stand in your own energy. And that's your power. It's going to be given back to you because you're pulling it away. I just tried to call these clowns. That's the first thing they say, oh, global, something happening global. More than that gonna happen if they don't stop taking and stealing and lying and cheating people of their sources. You see, they're resourcing you. And if you don't know that, that's not anybody's problem except your own. So if you are experiencing things, see, I don't know nothing but myself until I go online and get this information. Because see, I didn't call back my power to me. I called back my power to me when I stopped having sex with all these different people. I was giving some of my power away. I called back my power when I left people who did not give me energy, but they took my energy. I called back my power when I left a job that would not treat me fair and square. I called my power back to me. You see? Because we just a spirit and soul passing through. And nobody got the right to take more than they're giving you. So this is what's happening, y'all. Spiritually, our power is being returned. So please get your power. Take your power. I'm telling you what the Spirit's telling me. I'm on this ground barefoot, collecting. Get me, you got me? Trying to get this information for you. Stand in your power. Stand up to anybody who's been trying to bully you. Anybody who's trying to take your energy. Anybody who's trying to suppress you and oppress you. Today draws the line. This is what that 21st energy is about. Capricorn moon. You understand me? Get like a ram. We're in that Mars energy, which y'all should be using to call your power back by standing up for yourself. That's what's happening in the spiritual realm. Our power is being given back, but they're going to come give us this narrative of websites and all this bullshit. No, the power they've been stealing is being taken from them and given back to you. Stand in your power and stand up for yourself and watch how a lot of things start crumbling down because the scale's been unbalanced. And it's time for the scales to be balanced. Take your power back.
The house of cards is falling. It has to fall. Because one thing you got to understand about these outages or whatever, one thing you got to understand about the manipulation of the grid system, right? The smallest unit within our universe is a plank, and a plank is basically the symbology of a pixel. So that tells you that we live in a holographic simulation that is facilitated by Saturn and the moon that creates this photon-like spectrum of the illusion of physical matter. So that's why the grid system works in tandem with that holographic projection. It keeps you trapped inside the illusion. So the illusion has to be dismantled. So that's why, all this stuff you have in a interface transition within the infrastructure of Western civilization that was built on fraud, right? Everything that stems from democracy is built on fraud. That's why you having a war within the factions of the political system. You having a war within the war because, like I said, the inception of democracy came from Babylonian culture. Babylonian culture is satanic worship, right? Because it's the foundational blueprint of patriarchy, right? That basically subjugates nature. And because of patriarchy, like I said, is the epitome of capitalism. Capitalism leads to classism. Classism leads to racism and every other ism. And because of patriarchy, which subjugates nature, instead of going outside and picking fruit from a tree, right, which is based on the abundant energy of nature. That's what a matriarch is. You going outside getting fruit from a tree. You ain't got to pay nobody. You don't have to pay for the resources of nature. But because of patriarchy, now you got to go to Walmart to pay for your fruit, right? Now you got to go to work because you ain't got no time, to build your garden because you're always at work. So now you got to, that's what the infrastructure of patriarchy is. Patriarchy is basically the illusionary aspect that is basically giving you resources when really it's a form of degradation that stops the evolution of humanity and the planet, right? All this, works in conjunction with everything that's taking place. So the house of cards, the illusion is starting to crumble, right? So I'm gonna play this. It says right here, the major airlines and banks and media and outlets and more impacted by the global IT outage caused by software issue at CrowdStrike. Cybersecurity firm CEO speaks out, and some people try to say that it was a hacker that did it. That's all Marlicky. I don't believe that. Like I said, you have the manipulation of the grid system by way of ionized particles that is extracted from the plasma discharges of gamma radiation, ether, fifth element, right? The same energy that created everything in nature is going to destroy everything in the physical world.
Impacted, airports impacted at this hour, banks and businesses across the country, really across the world, mass transit systems, E911 centers are down as well. Updating you now, American Airlines and Delta say they are now starting to resume some flights, but we had multiple airlines overnight ask the FAA to put them into a ground stop because their own computers were not working. So it's going to be a long road to recovery here. Let's look at the FlightAware misery map, and you'll get a sense of how this is affecting air travel. See all that red? See those airports on the East Coast and into Chicago? They're having.
For the last time, I told y'all ass to stay off the airplanes, bro. Like I said, y'all really want something to happen. Like, I mean, it's going to happen. It's inevitable that the grid is going to go down because they said in the World Economic Forum, they said 2 years ago that in 2 years, the grid is going to go down, right? And then we also have Rahu in Pisces that basically is amalgamated with the sun, the solar energy, which makes the energy on the planet a lot more potent, a lot more stronger. So what happens is that manipulates everything within the infrastructure of technology. So if your ass want to keep getting on these airplanes, you want to keep going on these trips, like I said, that's on you. You know what I'm saying? Stay off boats, trains, and airplanes. If you got to travel somewhere, just drive. You know what I'm saying? Because it's easy for you to hit the brakes. You know what I'm saying? You're basically in control of your own destiny, at some point, you know what I'm saying, to a fraction. So like I said, if you stay off the airplanes because you're going that one time that you feel like you got to go on that vacation trip, you got to go to the Calabat, like Cabo, and you want to go to Bahamas and Jamaica that one time, and that grid goes down. That's all it takes is that one time. So it's like I said, it's not a matter of when it's actually going to happen. It's going to happen.
Significant delays. The number on the upper right hand is a little bit misleading because the true number of delays now nationwide 1,700, more than 1,000 flights canceled. The CEO of CrowdStrike was on the Today Show earlier this morning talking about the fact that they've now identified the problem and are already implementing a fix. Take a listen.
It could be some time for some systems that just automatically won't recover. But it is our mission, is why we're here, to make sure that every customer is fully recovered, and we're not going to relent until we get every customer back to where they were, and we continue to protect them and keep the bad guys out of their systems.
Okay, that's important there, what he just said, because he says this is not a hack, not a cyber attack. Rather, it was a bad software patch, and they're working now to get everybody back up the line. If you're flying today, guys, the delays will likely ripple through the entire day, even if you have a flight. We see air.
Like I said, we in the sun cycle, right? We in the sun cycle. The devil has a 6,000 year dominion on the planet. So when the sun is at the apex of spiritual consciousness, it manipulates third density, a glitch in the simulation, right? So like I said, stay off them flights. Get on them damn flights if you want to. You know what I'm saying? The chosen one's been told you. We've been told you to stay off them airplanes. So like I said, now you having a civil war over in Bangladesh, and they still without internet. Following up with many different protests. So it's inevitable what's taking place over there is going to happen over here, right? Only a matter of time. And I say, like I said, the video I put out talking about the tribulation period, we're going into tribulation season, right? Now, all this works in conjunction with the socio-political aspect of civics. When you're talking about the political infrastructure, when you're talking about the election period. So Joe Biden stepped down on National Ice Cream Day, right? Which is ancient symbolism. Now look at the date right here. The date shows you Sunday on the 21st of July, 2024. Now, when you look at the Satanic Ritual Agenda publication right here, it gives you all the dates of the satanic holidays and what they do on those dates. So on from July the 20th to the 24th is the July feast that is equated to kidnapping and preparation and child sacrifice, human female sacrifice. One thing you got to understand, like I said, the great majority of these women and these children, y'all got to be very careful because y'all stem cells and your genetical faculties is important to those who are not natural to the planet. That meaning that they need your energy and your vitality to keep this illusion going, right? So it's not a coincidence that he stepped down on the 21st on Ice Cream Day, because the ice cream is ritual is basically the creamy code ritual for human trafficking, which basically is connected to democracy that is being ruled by the deep state shadow government, right? Not a coincidence. So Biden drops out of the election on Ice Cream Day, National Ice Cream Day, because they want to put this little wench, right, in office. Joe Biden has endorsed Kamala to be the Democratic pick for the presidential election, right? Because like I said, your votes don't really matter, right? Because one thing you got to understand, like I said, we're going to go all the way back. We got to study civics. You got to read the federal laws and civil procedures. The 14th Amendment is a fraudulent contract. It was never ratified because the 14th Amendment is connected to civil rights. When you have civil rights, you don't have no rights. You have privileges. So as an indigenous person, you're supposed to be advocating for the Declaration of Human Rights that connects you to the Indigenous People Act. It connects you right back to the land to where you don't need no damn reparations from the democratic rulership, which is demonic rulership, right? Because people, this is the thing with, with so-called black people. Black people are so politically naive to the point where they want a sense of freedom. They want a sense of, they want a sense of freedom from the people who are subjugating them. That's like multiplying any number by zero. There's no evolution in that, right? Because like I said, you got to understand the inception point of where democracy came from. It's Babylonian culture. Babylonian culture is satanic worship, point blank, period. That's why you must study. So the Democrats need the black woman's influence and her vote, and they will destroy the melanated family to do it. Now, one thing you understand, they know that the great majority of, black women, so-called black women, are, destroyed on an emotional level, right? To where, they use the perceptional energy of the illusions of this militarized complex that they using on black women. What they doing is they're using black women to vote with their emotions and not with their logical faculties, right? Because if you understood the inception of the history and you know what Kamala Harris did, right, you know that you can't vote your way to freedom, right? You can't vote your way to freedom. The great majority of all the hedonistic concepts within the factions of democracy is basically the epitome of racism. The KKK is a Christian organization. They was basically connected to democracy. It came from the democratic rulership, right? All these things that's connected to democracy, it actually destroys black people as a whole. Because democracy, what it does is you mixing the medicine with the candy. They give you the illusion of progressiveness and they think that you're in a state of evolution because they're giving you all this so-called freedom in the name of liberalism, when really it's a form of an inverted lifestyle that goes against nature, right? It goes against the matriarchal order. So now play a video, right? Because Kamala Harris has been exposed. So a lot of people, you know, a lot of melanated women, they talking about this is the rise of the matriarch and all this other stuff. I'm not trying to hear that because you haven't did your edification. You cannot get a matriarch from democracy. Democracy is fraud. Fraud is based on a de facto corporation. That de facto corporation works on corporate internal codes under commercial law, which is maritime law, under ecclesiastical law, right? Anything that's connected to democracy is based on fraud. As we're gonna go all the way back when you was a little kid saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the Republic. It did not say to the democracy. All ancient civilizations from indigenous people started with a republic, right? Because a republic works in tandem with a matriarch. That's nature, right? So you cannot get a matriarch from democracy. She's giving you the illusion of the rise of the matriarch through patriarchy, right? Meaning that she's basically going to swindle you if she gets in office, whether it be her or Michelle Obama, like I said, or if we have an election at all, because what's happening with the electrical grid system, right? And which is also going to be a precursor to what's taking place in Bangladesh when you're talking about a civil war, right? I'm gonna play the video.
As Miss Black Lives Matter, when in reality, Kamala Harris was the queen of mass incarceration. Kevin Cooper was hours away from receiving lethal injection. Hours away from her. His lawyers asked the DNA evidence he acquired in order to make sure he was actually guilty of the crime. Kamala Harris's office tried to prevent DNA evidence from being acquired. They wanted Kevin Cooper to be executed. But the governor of California disagreed. They acquired DNA evidence and the execution was stopped. The New York Times tells us that she feels really bad about it. Whatever that is. And people can also recall that while she was head of the California State Attorney General's office.
You know what I'm saying? Because one thing I understand about Kamala Harris, she's actually, you know, against the so-called black race, right? And then people, they'll be like, well, we want to give reparations and stuff like that. One thing about reparations, why do you want economic freedom, economic liberation from the same system that's basically promoting degradation to you? This is one thing you got to understand. We do not need reparations. Black people don't need reparations, and we need the land back. Because why would you give people, first of all, the money is phasing out. The money hasn't been backed by natural resources since 1934. It doesn't have a gold standard, right? So the money is basically, you know, the epitome of fraud, which is connected to the Federal Reserve System, right? The money's not worth nothing, right? So with that being said, you don't want to get reparations. Why would you want to give money to a people who are, you know, spiritually broken and mentally fractured? Because the money you get from reparations, you ain't gonna do nothing but, you know, give your energy right back to the oppression, to the oppressor. So that's why we don't need reparations. Give us the land back, because that way we can build everything from the ground up as you have this intelligence coming back to the planet. Because when you get that intelligence coming back to the planet, that's going to tap you right back into the Fibonacci sequence of nature to where you can build those ancient civilizations back during the time when we had those fifth dimensional civilizations during the time of Atlantis and ancient Kemet and things of that nature, right? That's why the lady in that video said, the first shall be last and the last shall be first, right? It's a reverse of frequency. Everything is going back into its original balance, Mayat.
Over 1,000 people were locked up for smoking marijuana. She presided over jailing a lot of people. And on top of that,
most of those people she jailed were so-called black people, for the black women who is advocating for this woman to be in office. You shouldn't be voting anyway, because one thing about voting, when you participate in fraud, you can't claim injury to the system. So when you vote fraud, this is why the fraudulent policy enforcers, the police, that's connected to the 1724 Black Christian codes where the police get their policy from. This is why a police officer, he can go in an establishment and unalive hundreds of blacks and get away with it because you're participating in the fraud, right?
Drug labs in the state of California that were being used by the police were turning up false positive results. And yet Kamala Harris's office did not tell the defense attorneys or the judges about this. They knew that the drug labs were turning over false positives, and people went to prison because her office concealed that their drug labs were turning up false positives. And another thing about Kamala Harris, I don't know if people saw, but there's a video of Kamala Harris where she's bragging about how she jailed the parents of children who were truant from school.
I would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. And I know many of us will say the same thing. And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco. And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my reelection race. But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it.
You've seen the clip? And she gets up there, and it's the same kind of thing. She's giggling. Yes, I had the idea that we could lock up parents who were truant from school. You know, I wouldn't be anywhere in my life if it weren't for my education. And so not giving a child their education is a crime. And so I jailed parents, and she's giggling about it. It's just so great. And, you know, I see so much in U.S. media. They like to trivialize incarceration. There's so many shows on Netflix and all that where it ends towards the end where someone goes to jail, but it's part of the happy ending. It's okay. And they don't seem to realize what that means. You know, when one member of a family, a father or a mother goes to prison, or a brother or a sister, it hurts the entire family. And when Kamala Harris is up there giggling about, oh, you know, I locked up these parents because their kids weren't in school. You know, yeah, kids need to be in school. The kids aren't getting to school is a problem. But the worst thing you could do is then throw their parents in jail. That's not going to help the situation in any conceivable way. But when she's joking about it, she's laughing about it, Kamala Harris, she says, what did she say? She said, well, I wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for my education. It's about her. The big line when she was calling out Joe Biden, when she was trying to contend with Joe Biden in the presidential election, what did she shout at Joe Biden? She shouted, that little girl was me.
You know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
And then the campaign started churning out T-shirts with the face of 10-year-old Kamala Harris on them. Do you remember this? It's almost like she wants us to vote for her because she was once a 10-year-old child. I mean, that's what it sounds like. What's particularly interesting is, you know, you remember when Barack Obama was running for president. We knew everything about Barack Obama. We knew all about Barack Obama's pastor. We knew about Barack Obama's father from Kenya. We knew the school he went to in Indonesia. But Kamala Harris, barely anybody knows anything about Kamala Harris. Well, Kamala Harris's mother, who's now deceased, was from India, was a cancer researcher. And Kamala Harris's father, Donald Harris, was a Marxist economist and is a Marxist economist, professor at Stanford University. He was an advisor to the government of Michael Manley in Jamaica. And he and Kamala are estranged from one another. He did not attend Kamala's inauguration as vice president. They're not on good speaking terms. But the more you look at it, it's very clear that Kamala Harris sees herself as a victim. The way Kamala Harris speaks, the world has been unfair to her. And she blames Donald Harris for that to some degree or other. We don't know why. We also, there's rumors, we don't really know what happened when she was in Quebec. We just know she never talks about years that she spent in Quebec. But Kamala Harris thinks that she is a victim. She wants the whole world to know that that little girl was her. And she wants vengeance. She wants to make people pay. She wanted to make Kevin Cooper pay. She wanted to make those parents pay. That's what leftism is if it's stripped of economics. If it's stripped of class struggle, if it's stripped of a desire to have the people rise up and control the means of production, if it's just anger, if it's just revenge, it's just a call for destruction, a call for rebellion, That's what Kamala Harris is. Kamala Harris, she's very much a guillotine meme. That's what she is. It's the glorification of punishment, desire for revenge, and desire for destruction.
So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, for those who was advocating for this woman, the rise of the matriarch, that's a fake, that's false matriarchy because it's masquerading as patriarchy, right? The rise of the matriarch can only happen by way of the indigenous people who is propagating the true matriarchal origins of our culture. So one thing you got to understand about, the world is a stage. The world is a stage. It's a big monarchy system. So Donald Trump donated to Kamala Harris when she was campaigning back in 2011. It's one big club, right? He donated $5,000 to her, right? So if you was really against her, right, you're against democracy, you want to drain the swamp, then why are you giving money to the deep state, right? So one thing you got to understand, like I said, the world is a stage. Everything that took place during the time of Joe Biden and Kamala's inauguration, that was a false inauguration. That was a false inauguration because they was inaugurated before 12 p.m., right? Which is based on fraud. And none of the militarized groups that was out there during the inauguration, they didn't have their militarized garments and their medals on during the time of the inauguration, right? That's against the law. So with that being said, that's why I said Donald Trump is actually the last president, right? Donald Trump, you got to read this book right here, The Last President. Donald Trump is actually the last president. And the reason I say that is because he still has continuity of government. He has continuity of government because he is the one who implemented the National Declaration of Emergency Act, which gave full validity to FEMA, right? Because when FEMA is activated, that's when you activate martial law. When you activate martial law, that creates a neutralization and destabilization to where the military takes over, right? So whoever controls the military controls the whole infrastructure of the country, right? Because he is basically the commander in chief for Iran, China, and Russia, right? Pay attention to the signs and not the semantics that's being played behind the scenes when you're talking about the political system, right? Because you cannot, during the time of, the processional circle of the equinox, we at the apex of consciousness on the planet, meaning that we're vibrating at the seculum of a cycle, meaning that certain things have to come to an end. You cannot have democracy in a solar cycle, right? Because democracy is the epitome of patriarchy that's connected to the energy of the moon, right? So now we're in the sun cycle. The sun cycle is based on a matriarch. So that's how you know, by way of the celestial bodies and the galactical alignments of what's taking place on the planet, that's how you know what's taking place on the planet right now is actually semantics, it's fraud, it's illusions, right? Study nature and study the infrastructure of nature, and you will know what the fuck is going on the planet. So like I said, Donald Trump, he still has qualified immunity. He's still the president. He's the one who controls the military, right? So that's why you got to read this book right here, The Last President. Now, you got many different rituals going on. Like I said, you don't know. I don't know if this is a ritual for Michelle Obama to be in office because her mother just died, coincidentally, what I'm saying, on May 31st. Like I said, all this stuff is, to give you the false illusion of a matriarch. But like I said, the matriarch is the rise of the 13 crystal skulls, right? 13 is a matriarchal number, right? That's why the great majority of their buildings within the infrastructure of the simulation, they don't have a 13th floor, right? They say that Friday the 13th is bad. 13 is our number. 13 love, 13 wisdom, 13 respect, right? 13 is our number. 13 connects you to the Sirius star constellation, right? But that's a whole other topic. 13 is our number, right? So this is why, within the infrastructure of the grid system, everything is being manipulated. So that's why Costco is putting out ReadyWise 150 servings of emergency food buckets, right? because they know that we in that time right now. Pay attention to the signs. When you pay attention to the signs, that's how you'll be a step ahead. Symbolism is going to be their downfall. Pay attention to everything around you. Pay attention to nature. Pay attention to military, right? Pay attention to what's going on around you. That way you can be on top of things when the grid goes down. Now, as I was telling you before, one thing you got to understand about Rahu being in Pisces. Rahu being in Pisces is the epitome of a chaotic energy on the planet. Rahu in Pisces may enhance your spiritual inclination or interest in the occult science. You may be endowed with daring nature, which may help you to become the top performers in your respective fields, right? Meaning that you have to be tapped into your purpose in order to reap the benefits of the cosmic energy and the cosmic convergence of nature. You will have a strong inclination and persistence to achieve worldly possessions and spiritual consciousness, right? As I was telling you, the galvanization of the matriarch is the number 13, cosmic convergence. Cosmic convergence is the Christ consciousness on the planet that manipulates the grid system. So with that being said, one thing you got to understand about the whole infrastructure of commercial travel within this simulation. The last time Rahu was in Pisces is when the Titanic sunk. So when you also have Rahu in Pisces, it's collaborating with the energy of the sun, which makes the energy on the planet more chaotic and more potent and more stronger because it has an omicron-based energy, which is a phantom energy. Phantom energy manipulates the simulation, which causes a interface transition. Also, you got to understand that's going to cause a manipulation in the grid system because Rahu and Pisces is going to be in there until March of 2025. Because I was telling you before, 2025 is a 9-year. That's completion. The completion of the simulation with the manipulation of the grid system, the activation of the 13 crystal skulls, which is basically allegorical to the Christ consciousness because we have crystals in our skull, magnetites and dendrites in the brain, which ties the frequency of the soul and the mind together to where you become a whole brain thinker, right? Which makes you a genius, a genie, right? Which gives you 3 wishes to dismantle the 3rd dimension. So like I said, when you have the manipulation of the electrical grid system, stay off the air travel. Stay off the airplanes because when the grid goes down, you're going to be left behind, just like in Leave the World Behind. Right? So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give a quick rundown. Now, the foundational blueprint of this transmission is basically talking about the 13 crystal skulls that has a piezoelectrical frequency when they're basically amalgamated together and they hold a certain formation. And when they're basically in formation, they have the same power and infrastructure as the Ark of the Covenant and a Chronos Versor. A Chronos Versor has the ability to manipulate interdimensional portals to where you can look into the future and to where you can look into the past, basically, right? And these crystal skulls, they say that they was basically facilitated by the United Nations, which gave them to the Vatican archives. When you're talking about the Vatican popes of Rome and the dark priesthood, who holds our secret ancient records. So the 13 crystal skulls activates the Akashic records as well, because this also goes in conjunction with when you're talking about the epigenetic body that's connected to the Akashic records. Because in order to tap into that energy, you got to remember who you are from a neurological standpoint. But the inception of these crystal skulls came from the Olmec, the Mayan, the Aztec, and the Incas. So we all know that the Olmecs came from West Africa, right? During the time of Pangea, and then they traveled down to and created everything in Mesoamerica because the Olmecs are the ones who gave the edification to the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas on how to build step pyramids, right? So that's why you got to get this book right here. They Came Before Columbus by Ivan Ben Sertaba, right? So that's what this is all about. The 13 crystal skulls is the rise of the matriarch, right? Because the 13 crystal skulls is basically the symbology of the brain cells of planet Earth, the brain cells of Mother Nature, right? which causes a cosmic internet convergence of the crystal skull grid, which manipulates the grid system. That's why you have all these outages, right? All these worldwide outages and things of that nature. So that's not a coincidence that, Joe Biden and everything is stepping down. Everything is happening in divine timing and divine planning. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you real quick. Because it's important, you know what I'm saying? Galvanize your resources, because that outage, that power outage that happened, that came out of nowhere. When nobody ready for it, when nobody, prepared or anything. So what's going to happen for those who's going to get caught off guard? For those who wasn't doing their edification, wasn't doing their research, those who wasn't, storing up their resources in order to combat the energy of the manipulation of the grid system when the grid goes down, right? So all this is really based on the fact that they're trying to give you a false matriarchy under patriarchy, which is under democracy. So everything they do is based on neutralization and destabilization, because when they destabilize you, that makes you puts you in alignment to, you basically needing the government in order to reap the benefits of so-called liberation, right? So like I said, study civics, you know what I'm saying? You know that you can't get a matriarch in democracy. It's impossible, right? So that's why I say you got to do your edification, do your research on Kamala. You know what I'm saying? She is not for our people. Because like I said, how can you be for your people and you still working within the infrastructure of the government? Because like I said, it comes down to, logic. You know what I'm saying? You got to stop being politically naive. You got to stop being spiritually naive. Even when you look at it from a biblical standpoint, your antichrist is not somebody who works at Subway or McDonald's. It's not somebody who works at the bank. It's not somebody who is a CEO of a company, right? An antichrist is going to be working within the factions of the political infrastructure that also controls the religion, right? So your antichrist is not just going to be somebody, for those who are stuck in monotheistic belief systems. It's not going to be somebody, who's just a regular average person. It's going to be somebody who has religious influence and political influence. So why are you voting for these people anyway? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. End of transmission.
10,